That's the sentence I still can't say out loud without feeling my throat tighten. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? Like something out of a bad movie. A husband plotting to burn his own home. But it wasn't a movie. It was my life, reduced to ashes. Both literally and figuratively. I remember the smell first. It wasn't the sweet, smoky scent of a backyard barbecue. It was chemical, sharp and wrong, like melting plastic and gasoline. By the time I stumbled out of bed that night, the air was thick and black. My chest burned. I screamed for Ethan, my husband, but all I heard was the groan of wood cracking above me. It was 3 a.m. The air outside was cold enough to bite, but inside, hell had come early. I clawed through smoke, barefoot, coughing so hard my ribs felt like they'd snap. The hallway lights flickered. The power dying, one bulb at a time. "Ethan!" I shouted again, my voice swallowed by the roar of fire. And then, through the haze, I saw him, standing outside by his car, barefoot like me, but strangely calm. His arms were crossed. A neighbor was already calling 911. I could barely see his face, but I swear, even through the flames, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. Relief. Not for my safety, not for ours, but for the plan, whatever it was, finally working. That image is tattooed in my memory. His silhouette, lit by firelight, his jaw set like someone watching an execution, not a rescue. The fire trucks came, the chaos blurred into sirens, shouting, the hiss of water on flames. Someone wrapped me in a blanket. Someone else kept asking questions I couldn't process. Was anyone else inside? Did you see how it started? Was there anything left worth saving? No, there wasn't. By dawn, the house was a black skeleton against a pink sky. And Ethan, just stood there, arms around me, whispering things like, "We'll rebuild. We'll be okay. The insurance will handle everything." Insurance. It was the first word he said that made my skin crawl. Before that night, we were the couple everyone admired. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Ethan and I had been married 12 years. I was 38 then, working part-time as a floral designer from home. He was an insurance adjuster. Ironic, right? We lived in a 2-story Craftsman in a quiet cul-de-sac. We had no children, though not for lack of trying. That was one of those quiet wounds we carried separately, each pretending it didn't hurt the other. He was charming, in that smooth, confident way that made people trust him instantly. I used to love how he could walk into any room and make people laugh. My friends said I was lucky. I believed them. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was comfortable. Saturday mornings meant pancakes and jazz. Sunday nights, we'd sit on the porch, he with a whiskey, me with tea, watching the sunset spill over the street like honey. I thought that kind of routine was love. Quiet, predictable, safe. But love isn't always safety. Sometimes it's just habit dressed up as devotion. Looking back, there were signs. Small ones that felt like nothing at the time. Ethan had started working late more often. He'd come home smelling faintly of something floral. Not my kind, of floral. Not the earthy scent of gardenias and eucalyptus from my shop, but something synthetic, perfumey. Once, I teased him about it. He laughed, said it was from shaking hands with a client who wore too much cologne. I believed him. Money was another thing. He insisted on handling the bills, saying it stressed me out, and he wasn't wrong. I hated numbers. He'd show me statements, highlight things, explain with that patient smile of his. I thought it was love, him taking care of me, but love shouldn't require that much blindness. Then came the fire. The investigators said it was electrical. A faulty wire behind the living room wall. Ethan nodded solemnly when they explained it, comforting me with a hand on my back, saying, "Thank God it wasn't worse." But something about his calm unsettled me. He'd lost everything too, or should have. Yet he acted as if we'd misplaced a suitcase. Not an entire home. We moved into a rental 2 towns over. The insurance payout was in process, he said. He handled every call, every form. And at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd hear him in the next room, whispering into the phone. He told me it was work stuff. I told myself not to pry. After all, hadn't he just saved us? Hadn't he been the one who got us out alive? Still, every time he said, "It'll all be okay," it sounded rehearsed. Like he was reassuring himself more than me. 2 weeks later, I went to the mailbox and found a letter addressed to him from an insurance company, not ours. The envelope was thick, official, with the words, "Claim approval," in bold. Curious, I opened it. Yes, I know, I shouldn't have. But something inside me was already cracking, and cracks always let the truth seep in. The letter wasn't about our house. It was for a policy on a property I didn't know existed. A small apartment listed under both our names, though I'd never signed anything about it. And the payout, $50,000. My heart raced as I read it again. The signature at the bottom, his. The property address, an hour away. When he got home that night, I asked him about it casually. "Hey, did you buy another property? Something about an apartment?" He didn't even blink, just laughed, leaned down to kiss my forehead, and said, "Oh, that, just an investment thing. I'll explain later, okay?" But he never did. That was the first time I felt the chill that never quite left me. The kind that told me the fire hadn't been an accident at all. The weeks after that letter were quiet. Too quiet, like the kind of silence that follows a storm, but promises another one is coming. Ethan was attentive in small ways, cooking dinner, offering to drive me to appointments, even leaving little notes by the coffee maker. But every gesture felt rehearsed, as if he was following a script written for someone else's version of a good husband. The insurance money came through faster than expected. He handled all the details, of course. He always did. One afternoon, he came home grinning, a check folded neatly in his hand. "Good news," he said, waving it like a trophy. "They approved the claim. We're getting more than I thought, nearly double what we lost." I blinked. "How?" "You said the adjuster was strict." He shrugged, eyes gleaming in that way I used to think was confidence. Guess I know how to talk to people. That's when I remembered. Ethan was an insurance adjuster. He'd spent years learning how to read policies, how to find loopholes, how to make paperwork dance. It was his skill, his pride. But that day, it sounded more like a threat than a talent. Later that night, I couldn't stop replaying the fire in my head, the way he was already outside, the way he hadn't called out for me, the way the firefighters said the flames started near the laundry room, where he'd been earlier that evening, fixing the dryer. He'd always hated that dryer, said it was a waste of energy. He'd even joked, "One day, this thing's gonna go up in flames and take us with it." At the time, I laughed. Now that line echoed like a warning I hadn't heard in time. A month after the fire, I went back to the ruins of our old home alone. Ethan was busy with work, and I told him I needed closure. Really, I needed to breathe without his presence pressing against me. The house was cordoned off, but I slipped through the tape anyway. The walls were gone. Only blackened beams remained, jutting toward the sky like charred bones. The smell still lingered, a bitter mix of smoke and melted plastic. My shoes crunched on glass as I walked through what used to be our living room. I stopped near the laundry area, The metal drum of the dryer was warped, twisted. I crouched down, brushing aside ash until I found something small and shiny. A melted piece of metal with a faint label still clinging to it. Accelerant cap, methyl-based. I didn't understand all of it, but one word stood out, accelerant. That wasn't supposed to be there. I took a photo with my phone. My hand shook so badly that the image blurred. Still, I knew I had to keep it. That evening, I confronted him. We were sitting at the kitchen table in the rental, the same spot where we used to play cards and laugh about nothing. Ethan, I began softly. The fire investigators. They didn't find anything strange, right? He didn't look up from his plate. No. Why? Because I went back to the house. I found something. A piece of metal with an accelerant label. He froze. Just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. A twitch in his jaw. The faintest narrowing of his eyes. Then came the practiced smile. Sweetheart, you shouldn't be poking around there. That stuff's dangerous. Could have been from anything. Paint thinner, glue, cleaning agents. But you said it was electrical. I pressed. He sighed, setting down his fork. It was. Please, can we not do this? We're finally getting our lives back. The conversation ended there, but the silence afterward said everything. He started locking his office. His phone was always face down. I noticed new cologne, a different brand. Musky, expensive, not something he'd ever worn for me. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and hear him on the phone again, whispering. Once, I caught part of it. She won't find out. I didn't sleep much after that. I started doing my own digging. Quietly, carefully. One afternoon, while he was at work, I used his spare laptop. He always said it was for business only, but the desktop told a different story. There were folders labeled Projects, Taxes, and one called R. Miller. I opened it, expecting client files. Instead, I found scanned documents, insurance forms, claim letters, and photos of our house before and after the fire. But what made my stomach twist was the name on the second page, Renee Miller, co-owner. I didn't know any Renee Miller, yet her signature sat right next to Ethan's. And under that, a bank account number, not ours. I clicked through more files, heart hammering, until I saw it. An email chain between Ethan and Renee. The subject line, transfer once she signs. I didn't read further. I didn't need to. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling my life fracture into 1,000 jagged pieces. That night, I acted normal, made dinner, asked about his day. He smiled, kissed my cheek, told me I was his rock. I almost laughed. After he went to bed, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried, quietly into a towel, so he wouldn't hear. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed proof, real proof. The next morning, I made an excuse, said I was visiting my sister. Instead, I drove to the address listed on that mysterious apartment policy. It was a beige complex with numbered doors and a cracked parking lot. My heart pounded as I climbed the stairs to 2B. The door was ajar. Through the gap, I heard laughter. A woman's voice, warm and familiar in that way that instantly breeds jealousy. And then I saw him, Ethan, sitting at a small kitchen table, holding hands with a younger woman, Renee. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed again, brushing his arm. There were moving boxes stacked by the wall, and on the counter a stack of cash. Thick envelopes, rubber banded together. I stepped back before either of them saw me. My knees shook so badly I had to sit in the car for 10 minutes before I could drive away. That was the moment I knew. The fire wasn't just about money. It was about starting over. Without me. I drove home on autopilot that day. No radio, no thoughts, just the dull throb of disbelief echoing in my chest. Every red light felt like an accusation. How could you not see this coming? When I finally parked outside our rental, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw every memory we had into that same fire he started. But more than anything, I wanted to understand why. When Ethan walked through the door that evening, I almost convinced myself to stay silent. He came in whistling, a bag of takeout in his hand. Acting like the man I'd loved for over a decade, he kissed the top of my head. "You okay, babe? You look tired." I forced a smile. "Just running errands," he nodded, unpacking the food. I was thinking, maybe we should take a trip soon. Somewhere new, somewhere quiet. That word again. New. The same word I saw on the moving boxes at Renee's apartment. My heart was pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. I couldn't sit through dinner pretending anymore. "Ethan," I said quietly, "how long have you known Renee Miller?" The air shifted instantly. He froze mid-bite, fork halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down slowly, his eyes narrowing just enough to betray the truth. Before he even opened his mouth, "Where'd you hear that name?" "I saw the insurance papers," I said, voice trembling but steady. "The apartment, the claim. Her name is on everything, isn't it? She's not just a friend, is she?" He stared at me. That long, silent stare that once made me feel seen, but now made me feel cornered. Finally, he sighed. "You shouldn't have gone looking, Claire." That was the moment my world tilted on its axis. Not no, not you're wrong, just that. Quiet, resigned, like I'd stumbled onto something inevitable. "You burned our house down," I whispered. He looked at me then, really looked. Not with guilt, but with the cold detachment of a man trying to decide if telling the truth even mattered anymore. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said. I blinked. "Like what, Ethan? You planned an accident. I planned a solution." His tone was sharp now, defensive. "We were drowning, Claire. You don't even know how bad it got. The debts, the mortgage, the failed investments. So you torched our home." He stood up, pacing. "You think it was easy for me? You think I wanted to? I had no choice. I knew the system. I knew what would look accidental. We could have started fresh, clean slate, with her." I said quietly. He didn't deny it, just ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "Renee believed in me." I laughed then. A hollow, shaking sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "She believed in your plan to commit fraud, to kill me if I hadn't woken up in time." That broke something in him. He slammed his hand against the wall, the sound echoing through the small kitchen. "Don't twist this, Claire." I checked everything. "You were supposed to be at your sister's that night." My knees nearly gave out. You checked." His voice softened. "Too late, too careful. I didn't want you hurt. It was supposed to be clean. The house burns. We collect. We move on. He hesitated. And there it was. The final nail in whatever love I had left. I wanted to call the police right then, but I didn't. Not yet. If I went to them without proof, without something solid linking him to the fire, he'd twist it. Say I was traumatized, unstable, grief-stricken, and honestly, I wasn't sure they'd believe me. He worked in insurance. He knew how to make lies look like truth. So I played along. For the next few days, I smiled, cooked, pretended to forgive. I even let him believe I wanted that fresh start. But every time he left the house, I documented emails, phone calls, financial records, anything that hinted at fraud. One night, I recorded him on my phone while pretending to sleep. He was pacing in the living room, whispering into the phone. "Yeah, she's buying it," he said. "Once the second payout clears, I'll transfer your part. Just keep quiet until then." There it was. Proof. I didn't feel satisfaction, just nausea. I took everything to a lawyer first, A quiet middle-aged man named Harris, who listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled slowly, rubbing his chin. This is serious, Claire. If what you're saying is true, this is arson and insurance fraud. You could also be in danger. I nodded. I just want out. I don't care about the money. I just want to be free of him. He promised to contact the authorities discreetly. Meanwhile, I played my role. Dutiful wife, grieving victim, Ethan, unaware of the storm gathering around him, started making plans to sell the new apartment. One night, while he was on the phone, I heard him say, "Once the divorce is filed, it'll all be clean. She'll get her cut and we'll be done. Her cut." He was already negotiating my worth like a transaction. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on the door. 2 detectives stood there, badges glinting under the porch light. They asked for Ethan. I'll never forget the look on his face when they read him his rights. His confident smirk faltered for the first time. "Arson? That's ridiculous," he barked. But they had the evidence. The emails, the recordings, the accelerant traces. He turned to me, eyes wide. "You did this?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "No, Ethan, you did." They led him away in handcuffs. The door closed behind them, leaving a silence so heavy it almost pressed me to the floor. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the flicker of candlelight on the wall. The irony wasn't lost on me. Fire had destroyed everything, but in some cruel twist, it had also revealed the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. 12 years of marriage, love, laughter, all of it built on a lie. When I finally went to bed, I whispered to myself, "You survived, Claire. You survived." It wasn't victory. It was survival. And that was enough. For now, the morning after Ethan's arrest, I woke to a quiet house that no longer felt like a home. The bed was too big, the silence too wide. For 12 years, I had built my life around the rhythm of someone else's footsteps. His alarm clock, his voice in the kitchen, his laughter on Sunday mornings. Now there was just stillness. I made coffee, though I could barely taste it. My hands trembled when I poured the cup. The smell of burnt toast drifted from the toaster, and it hit me like a cruel reminder. That smell of smoke, of everything gone wrong. I had to open a window just to breathe. The detectives had told me I'd need to give a full statement. They wanted details. Everything I knew, everything I'd seen. So I told them everything. The accelerant, the forged documents, the fake property claim, even the other woman. They listened. They nodded. And when I was done, one of them said softly, "You did the right thing, Mrs. Langford." I didn't feel like I had. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like grief. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and questions. Reporters camped outside the house. Neighbors whispered when I walked by. Some offered sympathy, others pity. Both felt like salt in an open wound. I avoided them all. Instead, I spent hours sorting through the fragments of my old life. Insurance forms, old photos, burnt jewelry boxes. Things half melted, half salvaged. Each item felt like a ghost. In one of the boxes, I found our wedding album. The edges were singed, but the photos inside were mostly intact. There we were, young, smiling, naive. I traced my thumb over his face, then closed the album and tucked it into a drawer I didn't plan to open again. Renee's name came up during the investigation. The police said she'd cooperated, claimed she didn't know about the fire, that Ethan had told her the money came from a business venture. Maybe that was true, maybe it wasn't. Either way, she disappeared soon after, leaving no forwarding address. Part of me wanted to hate her. Another part just pitied her. After all, I'd been her once. The woman who believed his lies. About a month after his arrest, I received a letter. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Ethan's. Neat, slanted, methodical. I hesitated before opening it, then unfolded the single sheet inside. Claire, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't blame you. I made a mess of everything, thinking I could fix it my own way. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. You have to believe that. I thought I could control the fire. I thought it would burn just enough to save us. But I guess I was wrong about everything. Please take the money they recovered. Start over. You deserve that much. I read it twice. The words felt hollow, rehearsed, like the final plea of a man who only regretted being caught. Still, for reasons I couldn't explain, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my nightstand. Not as forgiveness, but as proof that I'd survived someone capable of destroying everything for a lie. A few weeks later, I started volunteering at a local shelter. It was a small place for women, mostly those escaping bad marriages or abusive homes. I didn't tell them my story at first. I just listened. There was something healing about hearing other women's voices. Trembling, angry, brave. Each of them had faced their own kind of fire. Some literal, most emotional. One of them, a soft-spoken woman named Tessa, said something that stuck with me. Sometimes when the house burns, she said, it's just life clearing space for something new. I thought about that for days. Maybe that was what my life was now. A clearing, an open, scorched field, waiting for something honest to grow. When Ethan's trial began, I sat in the courtroom for only one day. He looked thinner, older. His lawyer did most of the talking. When they read the charges, arson, fraud, attempted insurance deception, he barely flinched. When my name was called, I stood. My voice trembled, but I spoke. I told the court about the night of the fire, about the lies, about how close I came to dying in a house he'd meant to destroy. At one point, our eyes met. For the first time in months, I saw something in his expression that wasn't arrogance or denial. It was emptiness. Like a man staring into the ashes of his own making. He was sentenced to 8 years. Not enough, maybe, but enough for me to breathe again. After the verdict, I drove out to what was left of our old neighborhood. The house had been cleared, the lot empty, except for a patch of grass and a single mailbox post that somehow survived. I parked, stepped out, and just stood there, letting the wind hit my face. I closed my eyes and tried to picture what it used to look like. The porch swing, the flower beds, the way sunlight spilled across the front steps in the mornings. It hurt, but it also felt clean. Like finally exhaling after holding my breath for too long. I took one last look, whispered a quiet goodbye, and left. It took months, but eventually I found a small cottage by the coast. White walls, blue shutters. Nothing fancy, just peaceful. There's something about hearing waves instead of sirens at night that makes it easier to sleep. I planted new flowers in the yard. Daisies, lavender, rosemary. The smell reminded me that not all burning things end in destruction. Some cleanse, some renew. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with my tea and watch the horizon. Sometimes, I'd still think of Ethan, of how close I came to losing my life for his greed. But mostly, I thought about what I'd gained. Peace, solitude, and the courage to start over. One evening, I found myself writing again. Something I hadn't done in years. Not a letter, not a list, just a story. It began simply. My house burned down. Not by accident, but it taught me how to rebuild. I didn't write it for pity. I wrote it so I'd remember that survival isn't just escaping the flames. It's learning to live after them. When the verdict was announced, I thought the story would end there. 8 years behind bars, restitution ordered, the insurance company clearing my name. It sounded final, but endings aren't neat in real life. Not when the damage ripples outward. The first ripple came from people I'd once called friends. For months after the fire, my phone had been silent. But now, as Ethan's trial made the local news, messages began trickling in. Some were sympathetic. "I'm so sorry, Claire. We had no idea." Others were laced with curiosity disguised as concern. "I can't believe Ethan did that. How much was he going to get from the insurance?" There was one that stung most. From Michelle, our old neighbor. She wrote, "I always wondered how you two could afford that house. Guess I know now." I didn't reply. I just turned off my phone and sat in the quiet, staring at the waves outside my window. People love to watch a tragedy, especially when it's someone else's. A few days later, Detective Morris called. "Mrs. Langford," he said, "the department's wrapping up the case, but I wanted to tell you something personally. You saved lives." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He explained that the night of the fire, the blaze had spread faster than expected. If the neighbors hadn't called so quickly, it could have taken the adjoining property too. "Your husband didn't just risk you," he said quietly. "He risked everyone nearby." The words made my chest tighten. I hadn't realized how weird his carelessness reached. How far betrayal burns when it's fueled by greed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the flames, the heat, the sound of cracking beams, and then I thought of something else. How easily I might have believed his story. How many times I'd chosen peace over truth, silence over confrontation. I promised myself I'd never do that again. Months passed. Slowly, life began to take shape again. I started working at a community center, teaching basic budgeting to women starting over. Some divorced, some widowed, some just lost. It was strange at first, talking about money after everything that had happened, but it also felt like reclaiming power. One afternoon after class, a young woman lingered by the door. Her name was Ellie. She said, "I saw your story on YouTube." I froze. "My story?" She nodded. "Someone did a video about insurance fraud cases. Yours was in it. I didn't know it was you until you talked about the fire." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hide. Another part, the part that had lived through smoke and lies, felt oddly calm. Ellie went on, "I just wanted to say thank you. My boyfriend's been pressuring me to do something shady with his taxes. Watching what you went through, it made me realize I don't owe him that." Her voice cracked on the last word. Something inside me softened. I reached out and took her hand. "You don't owe anyone your safety," I said. "Not for love, not for fear." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked out. For the first time in a long while, I felt like something good had come from the ashes. A few weeks later, I got a letter from the insurance company. They were refunding the premiums Ethan had paid and compensating me for damages as part of a settlement. It wasn't a fortune, just enough to start over properly. I used it to build something small, but mine. A home with no secrets. I bought second-hand furniture, painted the walls myself, and even built a garden bed. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I'd lost. Sometimes, when I turned the soil, I'd find bits of glass or stone, remnants of something broken, but I'd set them aside gently, like artifacts of a life that once was. One Sunday morning, I saw a familiar face outside the grocery store. It was Ethan's sister, Julia. We hadn't spoken since the fire. She hesitated before approaching, eyes red-rimmed, voice trembling. "Claire." "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't." I nodded. "I believe you." She exhaled shakily, then said, "He keeps asking about you. From prison. He said you haven't written back." I don't have anything to say, I replied softly. Julia nodded, eyes filling with tears. He's not the same. I think he finally understands what he did. I wanted to believe that. Maybe I did, a little. But forgiveness isn't a key that fits every lock. Sometimes it's just a quiet acceptance. A decision not to carry the weight any longer. Before she left, Julia said, "You didn't deserve any of it, you know." I looked at her and managed a small smile. I know, but I survived it. That's what matters. News travels fast in small towns. When people learned I was volunteering and rebuilding, the whispers began to shift. Poor Claire turned into strong Claire. And though I didn't need anyone's approval, it was comforting. Even the reporters lost interest eventually. There were new scandals, new stories. My name faded from the headlines, replaced by someone else's heartbreak. And that's when I realized something important. The world moves on, whether you do or not. You have to choose. Stay in the ashes, or walk out into the light. A year after the fire, I lit a candle in my new home. It wasn't for mourning. It was for memory. I placed it by the window and watched its soft flicker dance against the glass. The flame was small, gentle, not the wild, consuming blaze that once destroyed everything, but a reminder that fire can warm as much as it wounds. I whispered a quiet prayer, not for Ethan, not for revenge, just gratitude, for survival, for truth, for peace, for finally being able to breathe without the smell of smoke. That night, as I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window. Not the frightened woman who once begged for love in the ruins of a lie, but someone new, calm, steady, unbroken. Maybe the fire had burned my home to the ground, but it had also burned away my illusions, and what remained was me. Raw, real, and finally free. It's been 3 years now since the fire. 3 years since the smell of smoke and betrayal clung to my skin like something I couldn't wash off. I live in a small white cottage by the coast, the kind of place where time moves gently, where the morning air smells like salt and freedom. Sometimes I still wake before dawn, expecting to hear the creak of the old house or Ethan's voice calling from the hallway. Then I remember, that chapter is closed. The house is gone, and so is the man I thought I knew. But the thing about trauma is that it doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It stops screaming and starts whispering. Little reminders of what once was. I've learned to live with those whispers. They don't hurt as much now. In my garden there's a rosemary bush that's grown wild. I planted it from a tiny seedling the spring after the trial. At first, it barely survived. Brittle, fragile, unsure. But now, it stretches toward the sunlight, full and fragrant. Every time I brush past it, the scent clings to my hands. It reminds me that even things that were once broken can flourish again. I've made friends here, real ones. Neighbors who drop off lemons from their trees. Women from the shelter who come by for tea. People who know me not as the woman whose husband burned her house, but simply as Claire. Sometimes I tell bits of my story, carefully, selectively, not because I need sympathy, but because stories have power. They remind others, and me, that pain can be survived. Last autumn, I received a letter from the prison chaplain. Ethan had started attending a recovery program and wanted to make amends. He'd asked if I would consider writing back. I sat with that letter for a long time. I thought about the years we shared. The laughter, the holidays, the small tendernesses that were real. Even if everything else fell apart, I thought about the fire, the betrayal, the fear, the smoke curling through the air like a warning I hadn't seen soon enough. And I thought about who I had become since then. Then I took a deep breath, picked up my pen, and wrote 3 sentences. Ethan, I have nothing left to forgive. That part of my life has ended. I wish you peace in whatever you're seeking. Claire, I sealed the envelope and mailed it the next morning. Not for him, for me. A few months later, I was invited to speak at the shelter's annual fundraiser. The director wanted me to share a few words about resilience, about rebuilding, when I stood on that small stage, looking out at the faces. Women from all walks of life, each carrying her own invisible fire. I realized something. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. My house burned down 3 years ago, I began. A murmur went through the room. It wasn't an accident, I continued. But that's not the story I want to tell you. The real story is what came after. I told them how I'd thought my life was over, how I'd walked through ashes, thinking nothing could grow again, and how, little by little, it did. When you lose everything, I said, you start to see what truly matters. And sometimes, the things you rebuild after the fire, they're stronger, truer, and kinder than what stood before. When I finished, there was silence. Not the polite kind, but the heavy, thoughtful kind. Then came the applause, not loud or frantic, just steady, like waves against a shore. Afterward, one woman hugged me and whispered, "You gave me hope." And for the first time, I felt like I'd finally done something with all that pain. Turned it into light. That night, as I drove home, the sky was clear and the moon hung low over the ocean. I rolled down the window and let the wind tangle my hair. The air smelled of salt and rosemary. When I reached the cottage, I paused outside, looking at the small glow of the candle I'd left on the windowsill. It flickered softly, steady, alive, and I realized the fire that once destroyed me no longer owned me. It had become something else. A reminder, a teacher. Sometimes I still visit the empty lot where our old house once stood. It's just a field now, overgrown with wild grass and tiny yellow flowers. When the wind moves through it, the sound almost feels like the sigh of something finally at peace. I walk the edge, close my eyes, and imagine the life I might have had if things had gone differently. Then I open them again and remember the life I have now. Quiet, honest, and my own, and that's enough. These days, I work full-time at the shelter. I mentor women rebuilding after loss. Some from violence, some from betrayal, some from simply losing faith in themselves. I tell them the same thing I tell myself every morning. You're not what happened to you. You're what you do next. I've written those words on a note pinned above my desk. They remind me of who I've become. Not the woman who once lived in fear, but the one who learned to stand in her own light, sometimes, when new residents arrive. Frightened, quiet, clutching plastic bags of their belongings. I take their hands, look them in the eye and say, "You're safe now. You'll find your way back." Because I know what it feels like not to believe that. And I know what it feels like when someone finally does. The fire took everything, but it also gave me something I never expected. The chance to start over, stripped of illusion, grounded in truth. I don't need a big house anymore. I don't need perfect love or polished appearances. What I have now is enough. Peace, purpose, and the knowledge that I survived the worst and came out whole. And sometimes, when I light a candle in the evening and watch its steady glow, I whisper to myself, "You made it, Claire. You made it." When people ask me now if I've forgiven him, I tell them this. Forgiveness isn't something you give to make the other person feel better. It's what you do so you can finally stop living in their shadow. I don't hate Ethan. I don't wish him pain. I just wish him truth. The kind that burns hot enough to change you, but not to destroy you. And as for me, I've learned that some fires are not meant to end you. Some are meant to clear the ground, so something honest can grow. If you've ever been through a betrayal that left you standing in the ashes, wondering who you are without the person who broke you, I hope my story reminds you of this. You are still here. You are still whole. And the flames that once tried to consume you might just be the reason you finally found your light. Would you have done what I did? Would you have exposed him, even if it meant losing everything? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Because every week, I share another voice, another truth, and another reminder that no matter how deep the hurt, healing is always possible.